video, we're going to be talking about headlight adjustment. Headlight adjustment is something that I think a lot of people overlook, and this is something that being a person who has poor eyesight, and especially poor nighttime eyesight, it's pretty important to me. So hopefully some of these tips and tricks about how to do adjustments, what you're looking for, how it's supposed to be done, will help you, so that way not only can you see better, but hopefully you don't blind oncoming traffic accidentally. So let's go ahead and get started with headlight adjustment and what the heck is it, and then we'll talk about some of the questions about headlight adjustment and anything that comes along during the live feed. Speaking of which, if you have questions about headlight adjustment and I haven't covered it as we're talking about it, drop your comments and your questions below, and we do try to answer those comments and questions throughout the video as we can. I will also mention that if you hate vertical videos, don't worry, we're going to have the 4K widescreen version out tomorrow, so if you're watching live, don't worry about it. If we miss a little something or it's hard to see, we'll have it out on our YouTube channel tomorrow. Okay, without further ado, what the heck is headlight adjustment? So headlights in any car are going to have some amount of adjustment. All Miatas have headlight adjustment to some extent. Now, when I'm talking about headlight adjustment, in particular, I'm going to be talking about its up, down, left, right adjustment. And this is actually where the beam pattern is being thrown down the road relative to how the car and the headlight sits bolted onto your car. There is an adjustment on most headlights, and just to give you a little bit of a kind of an example, this is an NC1. They look different on the backside. This one I got an example, so don't worry about the front. But on the backside, you're going to have your housing, generally speaking, and then you're probably going to see a number of these little wheels. And if I turn it this way, you can kind of see they have teeth on them. They usually have a little hex feature on, oh, there it is, on the back side of it, though not always. The other thing that you may see on your headlight, especially if you've never done this before, you may not see these at all because oftentimes they have plastic covers over the top of them. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. But essentially, you'll have some kind of an adjustment, usually like this. Also, some of the older designs, like this is an NB2, will have this, almost looks like a guitar tuner style top on it, where there's a big bolt that sticks out, and that is your adjustment right there. They'll look a little bit different depending on what vintage, but there's going to be something that's going to have a screw or mechanism that turns and spins, and that's how we make the adjustment. So when I talk about that adjustment being up, down, left, right, what it's actually doing is moving the internals, the guts of the headlight housing. You're not moving anything to do with the headlight housing, the surround, what bolts into the car, that all stays still. You're actually moving like the reflector bowls and your projectors if it's equipped. This whole internal mechanism, everything that's like your low beams and sometimes also your high beams are going to be moved relative to the housing itself by moving these little adjusters. And I will show you quickly using this. I will warn you if you're using headphones, it's about to get kind of loud. But essentially, I'm going to spin this adjustment, which on this particular setup, this is actually going to be the left-right adjuster. And you'll see this part of the housing move. So let's see, I've got it pretty much all the way in. So let's do this way. All right. So hopefully you could see that on the video, where this whole housing is rotating, it's pivoting based on this point pushing out a threaded boss. So that way you can have that left-right adjustment. And likewise, with this guy, you'd actually have that up-down adjustment because that's going to pivot the bottom up, so that way it aims your light up or down. So that's the adjustment that I'm talking about and how it's done as far as the housing is concerned. Now, what does it look like as far as down the road? You know, what is this actually doing to your beam pattern? Let's show off a example here. We have our new 2024. It has bright headlights on it, so even with the shop lights on, you should be able to see what's going on. And right now, we haven't done any adjustments to the headlights. They are just going to shine forward. But to show you what it looks like on a nice new vehicle, this beam pattern, actually let me step in front of this one. There we go. hopefully you can see that there's a relatively clear, clean cutoff line, and then it has this step kind of halfway through it. So this is a very modern beam pattern. And that line and that step can be moved around left, right, up, down with these adjustments. And we want to have most of basically the top part of the line set to where it is throwing light as far as it can down the road without being too high or too low, because then you'll have negative kinds of basically not enough light down the road if it's too low, or if it's too high, you're going to be blinding oncoming traffic, right? Also, that step that's there in that pattern, that is important. Let me turn on the lights again. There we go. That step there is important because on modern cars especially, where this is a more distinct feature, that's actually giving you a little bit more light off to the side of the road, where maybe there's deer in the ditch, or maybe there's a pedestrian or stop signs or something like that, that you want a little bit extra light a little bit higher up. So that step is important for, on this car being a left-hand drive vehicle where we drive on the right side of the road, that it's throwing a little bit more light off to the side and not into traffic. So that step is to help keep your light levels on road and off-road a little bit more defined. So at that step, that's going to be the brightest part of your beam pattern, typically speaking. And we want that to be as far down the road, still on the road, as possible. So this adjustment for these headlights, and this is for any Miata and really any car, is important to make sure that you get as much light as far down the road to give you as much visibility as possible without blinding somebody else. And really, that's the biggest con. If you don't have these headlights aimed properly, then you're going to either cause other people to not see very well and or cause yourself to not see very well. That's the whole point. So now that we've kind of shown you the practical, what we're doing on the headlights and what it means as far as the lights down the road, what are we actually aiming for? So let's talk about the tools required, because this will require some simple tools to get it dialed in. On the bench here in front of me, I have some very simple tools. For Miatas anyway, this is pretty much all you need, and not all Miatas need all these tools. But what you will need is a screwdriver. This is a number 2 Phillips. I have a very long pointy boy here, and it is important that you have a pretty long number 2 Phillips. If it's too short, you may not be able to reach the adjuster on your headlight, depending on which model we're talking about. I think this one is a 10-inch blade shaft. I don't know, lots of jokes there. But a longer Phillips screwdriver is going to be important. You can also adjust some of the headlights using a 8mm ratchet, if you can access those little hexagonal pieces. This is sometimes a little bit more difficult to be able to access on different cars, so I wouldn't count on this, but this is a good backup depending on what car you have. In particular, the NC headlights are actually kind of easy to use if you have a ratcheting end wrench or a socket like this that's small. Beyond that, we also need to know where your headlight level is relative to your headlights. And for that, you're gonna need some tape, a pen, so that way you can mark it, and also a tape measure. So on this, basically what we've done here, and you can see all of the tape that we have on the wall over there, I've taken measurements of the headlights, and you can see that I've drawn several lines, and these have been here for a long time, but I've drawn these lines at specific heights, and even some of these actually have numbers on them. I'm just now seeing, but that is relative to the position of the headlight itself, because we need to know what the level of the headlight is at its right height. So first and foremost, your car should be parked away from a relatively flat wall on a relatively flat surface. That is important because otherwise your measurements may be very off. Once you've got that though, we're gonna measure out from the wall at least 25 feet. 30 feet is better. You know, if you can get up to 50 feet, awesome. Basically, we're talking about the angle that we need to be able to aim for. So I've marked off, I think this is 25 feet here just because it was convenient here in the shop. But now we need to take our tape measure and measure from the ground to on your headlight housing. There's going to be a little kind of a little indent. It's sometimes a square, sometimes a circle. You may or may not be able to even see it on the video. And this will be NBs through NDs. Unfortunately, NAs, this doesn't apply because you have 7-inch sealed headlights. But if you have a more modern car, there's a little mark there. And all we're doing is we're measuring from the ground to that point, because that point is the exact center of either your projector or your reflector bowl, as far as where the light output is going to be brightest. So on this car, we are right about 24 and a quarter inches. Sorry, I only have freedom units on this tape measure, but this is just an example. You'll have to measure your own car. But what we're going to do is take that, let's just say 24 and a half inches, and then we're going to come over here to the wall and have our tape marks. And on this one, I've already got plenty of tape here because a lot of Miatas wind up in this, kind of height range. But I'm going to take that 24 and a half inches and I'm going to drop it. Now, how much to drop it, this is going to be a little bit of test and tune, and it does depend on your ride height. But generally for Miatas that are about this 24-inch tall headlight position, I'm usually going to drop it about 2 inches, maybe 1.5 inches, depending on the kind of headlights that we're tuning up. So instead of 24 and a half, we're going to go down to 22 and a half. And I actually kind of already have a line right here that I've drawn before. So if I were using this mark as our 22 and a half to drop that measurement, that's going to give us a very slight angle. You don't need a whole bunch, but when we do the adjustment, we basically want to take those headlights, that horizontal adjustment, and bring that bottom step down to meet that level. And that is generally going to be where you need to land for your headlight adjustment. This is not going to be the whole story because you still need to go drive your car, make sure that that beam pattern is actually lining up with kind of the horizon point of a flat road. I don't know about you, but we don't have any actual flat roads here, so there is a little bit of test and tune anyway. But you're going to want to use that as a rough measurement, at least get you in the ballpark. If you're significantly higher or lower than that mark, you know that you need to be able to dial it in and actually get that adjustment correct, so that way you can get your height for your basically your visibility and not blinding oncoming traffic dialed in. Now, for the left-right adjustment, that is something that generally speaking you probably don't need to mess with any of that adjustment from the factory. Exceptions are going to be you've installed a new light that's aftermarket, you've installed a light because you were just in a wreck and this corner of your car got munched. And if that's the case, this frame, this piece here, where your headlight bolts in, it may not be perfectly square to what it was before when it was brand new. So if this point has moved back, your whole headlight is shifted a little bit, and so you may need to do a left-right adjustment. If you do, generally, in those kinds of cases, you're going to be using this as like a body line. If you imagine a line drawn from the middle of your headlight, basically back to your taillights. In this case, it's going to be maybe not quite to the taillights on the ND, but, oops. Let me give you an eyeball example. There we go. So I'm going to imagine a point that if I were to draw a line straight back, I'm going to sight down that line, and when the headlight is on and I'm looking at it straight on over to the wall, that step where the bottom of the step starts to make its line up, that's about where your headlight should be aimed left-right, so that way it's actually pointing straight forward. If you notice that your step is way off to the left or the right, it's going to be obvious, but it can be a little bit in that zone, and you probably won't notice if it's only a few inches off one way or the other. But this is a good way to just eyeball it. For most people, I would recommend don't mess with it unless you notice that it's off. Okay, I will stop there and see if we have any questions so far. Nothing I haven't covered? Cool. All right, so now let's get into a bit of the application-specific kind of adjustments. I've shown you mostly on the ND so far, but let's take it back. Let's talk about NAs first, because each car is going to have its own specific way to adjust the headlights. So let's talk about each generation one at a time. We're going to start back here with our NA. And I think these ones are probably the easiest ones to adjust, for most people anyway. And that's because these guys have the adjusters right on the front. You don't even have to reach over the engine bay. You don't have to generally use a light to be able to see them. But they're going to have a indent on the outside of the headlight and also an indent in the plastic itself here at the bottom. And you can see in there, hopefully, that there are some Phillips screws in there. And remember Phillips number 2 screwdriver? Yep, here we are. So anytime you make an adjustment for this guy, this one you actually don't even need a super long screwdriver, but this side light, or the side adjustment screw is going to adjust the right, left, right. And then the one at the bottom, there we go. This one is going to adjust this headlight up, down. Very straightforward. These ones are easy to get to. If you've ever owned an older Jeep or any older vehicle that uses 7-inch round headlights like this, they kind of all have the same adjustment where there's screws on the outside, generally speaking. So ALL Miatas, very simple. Let's move on to the NBs. I don't have an NB1 here today, unfortunately, but they are similar. This is an NB2, and on these guys, as I showed you earlier, let me grab this headlight so you can just have a quick, easy out of car. They do have this kind of tuning knob style, like a back of a guitar head or something like that, tuning knob adjuster, and it just pokes out the side. And on this car, or these headlights anyway, it only has just the up-down. It doesn't actually have a left-right. I think that maybe they were going to put one here and then they didn't. Not sure. But anyway, this is the one that we're concerned about. So on these cars, it's a little bit hidden because of your radiator core support. And I'll kind of point my finger to it. It's probably in the dark. But here it is right here. This one, you can use the 8mm socket on a little wrench, or if you want, you can use the Phillips and get that adjuster right there. But that's your up-down, and that's it. Pretty easy peasy. Okay, NCs. So these ones are going to be a little bit more difficult if you have a bunch of stuff in the engine bay, like a turbo kit. But they're still accessible. Let's see. These ones, I also recommend that you have a flashlight, because a lot of times on the newer cars, you'll need to be able to access these adjustment screws from basically little holes here in the radiator core support. On these ones, actually, it's these ones here in the corner. And I just realized that Nancy's headlights actually have never been adjusted, because I hope that you can see down in there, there's kind of a white plastic cap covering that. Sorry if the light's in the way. There we go. See that kind of milky white plastic cap? That's actually the cover that Mazda will put on some of these adjusters from the factory to basically lock you out of that adjustment. So on these headlights, there is kind of this groove that you can see where if I was poking that screwdriver down the little slot in the radiator core support, it would basically fit in here, and then it would engage with the teeth on the backside of this adjuster. And you can see, you can spin it either direction using that Phillips screwdriver. So that little white plastic cover that's on here, if you still have yours on, sometimes they just get old and brittle and they break off on their own. If they don't, they're just little plastic caps that if you use a small flat blade screwdriver, you can kind of pry them out and just get them out of there. There's nothing really that you have to worry about in the engine bay from damaging the adjusters or anything like that. These ones, as far as the adjustment's concerned, are pretty robust. I've never actually had an issue with this. What I have had an issue with is that if you go ham on your adjustment and you actually push the adjustment screw out too much, you can actually strip the plastic of this housing. So be careful. If it feels like it's not turning very much or it's difficult to turn, stop what you're doing. Make sure that you have a good, solid bite on these little teeth. But this is the adjustment screw for this guy, for the left-right. You can see kind of on this headlight. This is the left-right adjustment, and then this one, you need the long screwdriver so that way you can actually drop it down in there. And unfortunately, in this car, you're really not going to see much of that adjustment because we've got wiring in the way, but it'll drop down. It'll drop down here, and you'll basically access this a little bit at an angle when you go down through here, so that way you can get to the up-down adjustment. But you do need a longer Phillips screwdriver to reach that spot on the NCs. If, like on the right-hand side of NCs, if you had a stock car and you normally have your washer bottle tank over here in this corner, that comes out really easily. So if you needed to get access from behind to get to like your headlights or the adjusters on this side, it's pretty easy to take the stock washer bottle out of its position. I think it's like 2-3 screws. Pretty easy, just move it temporarily and you can really get easy access to that headlight. On the driver's side or the left-hand side, it is pretty difficult because you've got the fuse box in the way. If you do need to get back there, you can. If you've got really small, tight, narrow fingers, you can sometimes reach back there. I find it's easier that if you need to get back there, just lift the car up, take the left front wheel off, pull the fender liner out just a little bit, and then you can get access to all of that behind the headlight pretty easily. Okay, I think that's good on the NC. Let's move back to the ND. So NDs are kind of cool, kind of clever, a little bit quirky as far as their headlight adjustments are concerned. They do have the same kind of adjusters that the NC has. And just like the NC that I showed earlier, they do have these little access holes in the radiator core support. The problem is with these ones is that the adjustments are not straight down like you would hope, so you can't even really see them by shining a flashlight this way. You actually have to shine a flashlight at an angle, and I can't even see it on this one. Maybe I can see it on this side. I doubt that we're going to pick it up on the camera, so I apologize, but whenever you access the adjuster on these guys, you kind of have to go in at an angle and down to reach that adjuster. On this side, oh, actually, here, you may be able to see down there where the screwdriver is. These still have the caps on it, the adjustment caps that are that milky white cover, and we haven't popped them off to be able to make any actual adjustments to this car. But again, on the ND, just like the NC, that front left side, if you're going to get to the back side of these headlights, the easiest way, lift up the car, take off the front wheels, undo a couple of plastic clips to get to the back side, because you have to actually kind of reach up and under to get easier access to these headlights. From the engine bay, you can on these ones, actually same thing, you can move the washer bottle out of the way and get to the front right headlight, but fuse box is still over here on the left-hand side, so unfortunately you're not going to be able to really get to the back of the headlight on these guys. If you remove those covers, you know, say next time you have the car up in the air to do an oil change or something like that, then you'll be able to have easy access to make these adjustments here in the engine bay. These cars, they do have a left-right adjustment. This one that I was just showing you, this is the up-down. The left-right adjustment is actually even further down and buried on the underside of the headlight. I would love to show you, but I don't have a loose ND headlight. So, again, you probably won't need to mess with that unless your car's been in a wreck or something like that. But if you need to get to that one, for sure you're going to be pulling off the wheel. Maybe even just remove the bumper cover temporarily so that way you can have the car on the tires, do your headlight adjustment, put your bumper cover back on. So, that is one method. NDs actually have a few different methods for how you can do the headlight adjustment. The other adjustment that we can do on these guys is actually over here on the bench. So the other way that you can adjust headlights on an ND is with a paper clip. Although I think that personally having a couple of wires where you've stripped the ends off is actually a little bit easier, because what we are doing on the NDs is you can actually do the up-down adjustment using your OBD2 port. Whoops, sorry, this one. So this is a little jumper harness that we have, but it has the same female style plug as what you have under the dash on your ND. And this is only ND specific. Sorry for the earlier generations, this won't work for you guys. But on the NDs, you can actually use these jumpers to be able to reset your up-down adjustment. So to do that, you have to press your power button to be able to turn the car on, but you don't have to start the engine. So don't have your foot on the clutch, don't have your foot on the brake. Just press the on button twice to basically turn it on to an accessory mode. And then from there, we're gonna take this wire and shove it into the far right-hand side. And this is on the top row, basically the fat side. And then also, we're gonna shove it into the fifth one over. So like that. Now, with the ignition to accessory mode, all the lights on the dash are on, you know, you can turn on the radio, that kind of stuff. Basically, all you have to do is touch the wires together, be, you know, a half second, just 3 times, that's it. And when you do it, touch, 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 about a half second touch, half second off, half second touch, half second off, the high beam indicator on your dash should blink 3 times, and then you'll hear a little buzzer, and you'll probably also hear your headlight motors adjusting your headlights, because basically that's the reset procedure to tell the headlights that this is the new horizontal. Bear in mind, you do need to have your car on level ground because it's going to basically use the calibration of its onboard, I don't know if it's necessarily a gyro, but it does have a sensor that senses essentially straight down gravity. And that is going to be how it determines what the new level or horizontal plane is for your headlight adjustment. So this, I will warn you, is, while it's easy, and I made it seem very easy, do not use any of the other pins. Be very, very sure that you have the first pin and then the 5th pin in on this top row, because if you do any of the other pins and you touch them together, you're likely going to make expensive smoke come out of the car. I don't recommend it. So, if in doubt, jump onto our website. We have this headlight adjustment procedure on our ND Coney suspension kit. This is actually page 5 of our instructions. So you can go there, see this instruction page. It talks about everything that I just covered, and it has a nice pretty picture showing you where to put those wires in there. Now, I say I prefer using wires. You can use a little paper clip that you bent up like this. The trouble with this is that you kind of have to do it like this and shove one end in there at a time. It's a little bit chancy. So unless you know what you're doing, I would do it this way, even maybe with alligator clips on one side or whatever's easy. But make it to where you're very sure of what you're doing, because that's an expensive repair if you get it wrong. The 2016 through 2018 cars also have a third adjustment for headlights. I don't have that here to show you, but we actually sell a little levelizer, and it looks like an N-link. And on those cars in particular, on the left-hand rear, you take off the tire, and then there is actually a little lever arm and a little sensor box there. Maybe we'll link to that in the video, in the comments as well, potentially. But if you don't want to mess with this, if you can't be bothered with taking off those little plastic caps to get access to your headlights up there, our levelizer for that specific year range will allow you to basically have an adjustable link that tells your car where it's supposed to put the horizontal plane for your headlights up-down adjustment. So if you just want an easy buy a thing, there's no electronics involved, you don't want to have to pull off your bumper cover or anything like that, that can be an option for you. All of the later NDs, sorry, Mazda took that little sensor away, and now it just has a, I would assume, some kind of like a gyro or yaw style sensor. And so it doesn't use a physical arm that's attached to the suspension to tell the car how high or low or angle dipped, yaw it is for the headlight to know where it's supposed to be. So, in a nutshell, that's the NDs. A little bit more complicated than the earlier cars, but what would you expect for a newer vehicle? More options is good. There are some easy ways to do it. There's some old school ways depending on the car. But I think that that's a pretty good covering for all of the 4 generations as they sit at the moment. Do we have any questions or things that I haven't chatted about? Not so far. Cool. Okay. Well, I think that I rambled on for quite a bit. If you do have any questions about this process or need some clarification, feel free to reach out. You can email us, you can call us. You can also send us messages via Facebook and Instagram these days. So there's lots of ways to get a hold of us if you have questions. Hopefully this video helped you. If it did, please give it a like and subscribe. We try to do helpful content like this on all of our videos, so that way we're sharing information with the Miata world at large. And if you think this will help out a friend or somebody you know, send this video over to them. You know, this is what it's all about. Hopefully you learned something. And also, I will suggest, if you have suggestions of what else you're curious about, not just headlights, maybe something else about these cars, let us know in the comments. Give us suggestions. We always like seeing those. Thank you so much for those of you that do. But we like to cover all kinds of interesting topics, even stuff that may seem as mundane as adjusting your headlights. But until next time, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for watching, and we will catch all of you on the next FM Live. Thanks again.